By the time Natasha led Smokey back out of the rubble-strewn park, Tanya, Maria, and Andy were waiting for her with their horses saddled and ready to ride. Dawn wasn't far off, and the streets were dark and silent. The people who still went out searching for food or water were hidden away behind reinforced doors. The gangs that roamed the darkness had exhausted themselves from a night of debauchery and were returning to their own beds to sleep the day away. "We've been going over the tourist maps we got from the gardens," Tanya said, as Natasha swung into the saddle. "I think we got a good route picked out. Pelham Bay Park is only about 15 miles away. If we can make it there today, I think we're home free. We'll be out of the worst parts of the city and start to get into the subdivisions. I don't want to push the horses too hard on all this asphalt." Natasha pulled the pistol from her waistband that she'd taken from one of the men she'd killed. "This is .45 caliber. Will bullets fit your guns?" she asked, and handed it to Tanya. Tanya took it, but shook her head. "No, they're different. They might work in an emergency, but I don't want to be the one trying to fire that first round in case the gun blows up." "Either of you ever shot a pistol?" she asked Maria and Andy. Maria nodded, but Andy shook his head. "I've never even held one," he said, "unless you count Call of Duty or Gears of War." "I used to plink around with my brothers," Maria said. "They were more into guns than me, but I wasn't bad. I could knock a can off a fence post most of the time." Tanya eased hot sauce over and handed it to her, as Natasha passed the spare magazine across. She looked it over, familiarized herself with the safety, and checked to see if a round was in the chamber. Old habits ingrained from her father when he first started letting her shoot with the boys when she was 9. "Do we want to know how you got those guns?" Andy asked. "Only if you have strong stomach," Natasha said. "It involved much blood." As usual, they couldn't really tell if she was joking or serious. Tanya set a brisk pace and led the group toward the first of the 4 bridges they had to cross to get out of the city. These were the choke points, the most dangerous areas with no escape, and nowhere to run if organized groups were set up to block off both ends once they committed to crossing. The city was falling apart fast. The random screams and gunshots they'd heard throughout the night were testaments to that, and every day it would get worse. They moved quickly down the rubble-strewn streets and caught glimpses of fires burning in high-rises across the river in Manhattan. Some of them might burn for weeks. They could smell the smoke, but it wasn't thick, and it helped hide the stench of the river that was still filled with rotting corpses. It was a graveyard, a burial at sea, that had become the only way to get rid of a body, whether it was a loved one or a stranger dead in the street. The sun was up, and people were moving about when they came to the ramp to get on the first bridge. It angled up until it joined the 8-lane elevated highway. They rested the horses and gave them a handful of grain as they watched men and women with carts making their way up to the freeway. "If we go that route, it's about 3 miles before we can get off again," Tanya said. "The only other way is to swim the horses across the river." Nobody wanted to do that. The water was freezing cold, and they'd have to shove bodies aside to get through. Natasha had had enough of dealing with bloated corpses and didn't hesitate. "Bridge," she said. "If ambush is up there, plenty of cover behind cars." She was right. The freeway was choked with dead vehicles. When the geostorm hit and fried all the electronics, there were still millions trying to flee the city. Every lane was gridlock. The cars had died, and the people had gathered what they could carry and started walking. The local residents were taking what they left, going through the cars one at a time, looking for anything that might help and loading it into their carts. They gave the kids with the guns and horses a wide berth as they hurried past them to get on the ramp. The cars had already been picked over at least once or twice, and any food was long gone. But now they were gathering other things they'd passed on before, blankets or cooking pots, maybe a few kids' toys to keep the young ones entertained while trapped indoors. The teens adjusted saddles, checked the ankle wraps for tightness, hooves for any debris or loose shoe nails, and led the horses up the ramp, falling into line behind a man pushing a small wheelbarrow. There was a defined path to follow between the cars and trucks that were stuck on the ramp. It was a zigzagging passage to get to the top and on the main road, but once there the cars had simply died where they sat in their lane.
to keep listening to this audiobook. I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.